The day the HOA fined me for fishing with my daughter was the day I decided to buy the lake and make sure no one else in that neighborhood ever touched it again. Not out of anger, out of precision. Because when you bury your wife, watch your child crumble from grief and finally find a place to heal, only to be humiliated by a clipboard tyrant in yoga pants. You learn real fast that peace isn't given. You have to take it back. My name is Nathan Rye, 43 years old, widower, father to a 12-year-old girl who hasn't smiled properly in nearly a year. Until the morning I took her fishing. We had moved into Lakeshore Heights just a few months earlier. The realtor sold it as a serene, family-centered community built around a private 6-acre lake. Her smile froze slightly when I asked about the HOA, but she said all the right things. Oh, just lawn standards and mailbox. Heights. Very basic. They mostly just care about keeping the place nice. Sure. Nice. It was a quiet Sunday. Morning mist rising off the lake. My daughter Lily sat cross-legged on the dock, rod in hand, squinting toward the water like her mother used to. She'd just reeled in a small sunfish, her first, and looked up at me beaming. That smile was everything. It was the first crack of sunlight I'd seen on her face since Rachel's funeral. And then came the heels. Click, click, click. I turned to see a woman marching across the grass like she was inspecting. A military barracks. She wore bright tennis whites, a clipboard in one hand, and a phone already filming us in the other. Her hair was the exact shade of chemically blonde that made you think of words like Karen before you even heard the name. "Excuse me," she barked. "Fishing is not permitted in this community. This is a violation of the Lakeshore Heights HOA regulations." I stayed calm. "Good morning," I said, standing up slowly and offering a smile. "Just out with my daughter. It's catch and release. No mess, I promise." She didn't look at Lily, didn't smile, didn't even blink. "You must be new here. I'm Patricia Langley, HOA board chair. That lake is private. Fishing is strictly prohibited." I gestured to the welcome packet still sitting in our car's front seat. "The brochure says the lake's for resident enjoyment." Patricia's lips curled slightly. "It is. Within regulation. Fishing was prohibited 3 weeks ago due to ecological concerns. You should have received an email." "We didn't," I replied. She smirked. "Check your spam folder." Lily lowered her rod. "Did I do something wrong, Dad?" My stomach twisted. "No, sweetie, you didn't." Patricia tapped her clipboard. "You'll be receiving a formal violation notice. $500 fine. Please vacate the dock immediately." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just the quiet clarity of a moment you know you won't forget. I nodded. Understood. We packed up in silence. Lily sniffled once as she placed the fish back in the water. Patricia stood with her arms folded, victorious, as we left the dock. When we reached our front porch, I turned and looked back toward the lake. The sun had broken through the clouds, casting golden light across the water. I thought about Rachel. How she used to say fishing was the only thing that helped her breathe when chemo made everything else feel heavy. I thought about the hundreds of hours I'd spent rebuilding our lives just to bring Lily somewhere peaceful. And I thought about Patricia. That night, I sat at my computer and started digging. The HOA's website was thin on actual legal documentation. But public records? Those were fair game. I found the original development deed for Lakeshore Heights. The lake wasn't owned by the HOA. It was leased from the original property developers under a 25-year recreational use agreement. That agreement was set to expire in 41 days. Interesting. I checked the names on the original property lease. Then the company that still held the lake's title. Then the public tax records, which listed the parcel as recreational use, undeveloped. Private holding. The current owners? Barrick & Sons Holdings, a small, family-run real estate firm based 2 towns over. They'd inherited the property as part of a subdivision liquidation back in the 90s and had been leasing it to the HOA ever since. Quietly. No maintenance, no oversight. And more importantly, no renewal yet filed. I closed my laptop and stared out the window. The moon was full, casting its reflection across the lake. Patricia's voice echoed in my head. "You'll be receiving a formal violation notice." And the way she said it, not like a warning, like a declaration of war. Fine. They wanted to play with rules. I used to handle hostile mergers before breakfast. The next morning, I called Barrick and Sons. A polite young man answered. "Hi there," I said calmly. "I'm a resident of Lakeshore Heights. I'm interested in making an offer on the lake parcel listed under your holdings. Tax ID 298H44. I'd like to discuss a direct cash purchase." There was a pause. Wow. "That's unexpected," the man said. "We've actually had some back and forth with the local HOA about a renewal, but no agreement's been signed yet." "I'd like to meet today," I replied. "In person, no agents, just a simple deal." By 2 p.m., I was sitting in their modest office holding a file folder with financials, tax clearance, and a bank-certified check. "I'll cover all legal fees," I said. "I'll pay 15% above the lake's assessed value, and I'll close within 10 business days." The older gentleman, Mr. Barrick himself, leaned back, clearly intrigued. "That's a very generous offer," he said slowly. "Any reason you're so eager to own a lake, Mr. Rye?" I smiled. "Just protecting my daughter's fishing rights. By the time I left, we had a handshake agreement. No paperwork signed yet, but they'd put a hold on all negotiations with the HOA. They promised to call Patricia that evening and inform her that a third-party buyer had stepped forward with cash." That night, I sat beside Lily on the porch swing. She asked if we could go back to the lake next weekend. "Not yet," I said softly. "But soon." The wheels were already turning, and Patricia Langley had no idea that her days of ruling the dock with a clipboard were about to end. Permanently. The next morning, I got the first sign that Patricia knew something was off. A new notice was taped to my front door. Violation: improper storage of recreational equipment. My daughter's folded fishing rod, stored neatly in our side shed, had apparently breached some obscure clause about non-authorized outdoor gear. "Fine, $150. I didn't bother responding. I just smiled, walked inside, and opened a new spreadsheet. By noon, I'd built a timeline of every HOA notice I'd received since moving in. Then I started mapping those against community forums and public complaints about Patricia Langley and the board. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. A pattern of selective enforcement, targeted harassment, and a paper trail of fines issued to newer residents who pushed back. But if I was going to dismantle Patricia's HOA kingdom, I needed allies. And not just people angry about dead lawns and mailbox color codes. I needed people with insight, leverage, and motive. So I went walking. It didn't take long before I met Richard Evans, a soft-spoken retired civil engineer 2 doors down, watering roses that looked like they belonged in a botanical garden. "You must be Nathan," he said, not looking up. I nodded. He pointed toward the lake. "Heard Patricia got you for fishing." "She did." He sighed. "That woman once fined me $200 for having the wrong wattage on my porch bulb." "Want to talk? Over coffee?" He glanced at me, then gave a small, tired smile. "Come by around 6. I'll introduce you to someone who's been waiting for this day a long time." That evening, I stepped into a house filled with books, paperwork, and the quiet hum of jazz. Waiting there was someone I didn't expect. Margot Hamilton, a retired property attorney and one of the founding homeowners in the development. "She's weaponized the rule book," Margot said simply. "What started as a community standard turned into a private regime. Most people are too exhausted to fight her." I showed them the lake parcel's deed status. Margot blinked. "You're buying it?" "Closing in less than 2 weeks," I replied. "I want to shift the balance, but I don't want a war. I want the truth exposed so the rest happens naturally." Richard leaned forward. Then you'll need to understand how deep this runs. What followed over the next hour was a crash. Course in HOA politics gone wrong. Patricia had been board president for 6 years, re-elected by default due to low voter turnout. Her inner circle, 5 loyalists, occupied key positions: treasurer, enforcement chair, communications director, landscaping. Margot handed me a binder. I've kept a record of HOA budgets and spending allocations. A lot of money disappears. Under miscellaneous improvements, you'll find most of it benefits properties adjacent to board members' homes. What about the lake? I asked. Technically, it's not under their budget jurisdiction, Margot said, but she's been preparing residents for a strategic revitalization, code for a private development plan. Richard nodded. She wants to build limited-access luxury docks and a member-exclusive lounge on the South Shoreline. Once she secures lake control, she'll push a community-wide special assessment to fund it. And what do we do now? I asked. We prepare the neighborhood, Margot said. If you want to dismantle this properly, we'll need more than just paperwork. We'll need stories, testimonies, residents who've suffered in silence but are ready to speak up. By the end of the week, I'd quietly met with 9 families, all different backgrounds, ages, and professions. A foster mom fined repeatedly until she moved. A military veteran cited for unauthorized flagpole height. A bilingual couple accused of noise violations every time they hosted relatives for dinner. Each story was the same. If you questioned the board, they bled you dry. But something was changing. My name had started circulating, carefully, quietly, and instead of doors closing in suspicion, more were cracking open with cautious hope. I created a private messaging group, invitation only, no names, just addresses. I called it Dockside 6. In a week, we had 30 members. Then Patricia struck again. Lily came home from school with her shoulders slumped, her backpack dragging behind her. Dad, why did Ms. Langley tell everyone you were getting sued? Chest tightened. Who told you that? Emma. Her mom said you're trying to steal the lake. Later that night, I received another violation. Unauthorized use of social media to undermine community leadership. Fine, $300. There was no clause for that. It was completely fabricated. But I didn't fight it. I just added it to the chart, and then I made my next move. Through Margot's contacts, I arranged a private meeting with the city's zoning compliance officer. We met at a neutral site, a cafe halfway across town. I explained the plan Patricia had been peddling, exclusive development on the South Shoreline. I showed the current deed and the expiring lease. The officer's brow furrowed. She's trying to file permits on land the HOA doesn't own? He asked. Exactly. And she's doing it quietly, under the assumption they'll own it soon. He closed the folder. That's going to be a problem for her. Back home, I forwarded a legal inquiry to the board, a request for clarity on current HOA authority over leased land and planned structural developments. Patricia replied with a vague 2-line dismissal saying, the board is handling lake affairs responsibly. Further communication is unnecessary. She was rattled, and she was getting sloppy. But the next day, something happened that reminded me why I was doing this in the first place. Lily had drawn a picture, just crayons on construction paper. It showed us sitting at the dock, a giant fish smiling in the lake beside us. In the sky above, her mother's name was written in curving cloud letters, Rachel's Lake. I want to name it after Mom, she said shyly. When you buy it. I felt my throat tighten. I reached for her hand and nodded. We will. That night, I made the final preparations. I contacted Mr. Barrick. The environmental inspection was clear. The title was clean. I wired the funds. Closing was scheduled in 6 business days. Patricia still believed she had time. She still believed she'd win. But the next phase had already begun. 6 days later, the lake belonged to me. The transaction was clean, quiet, fast, a single wire transfer, a 9-page deed agreement, a handoff of a key to a rusted maintenance gate no one had touched in 20 years. The moment I signed, I became the sole legal owner of 6 acres of water and the 10 feet of shoreline that wrapped around it like a moat. That evening, while Patricia and her board were likely drafting their next newsletter about community decorum, I walked the perimeter of my lake, not their lake, not the HOA's lake, my lake. I let the breeze carry the distant sounds of evening traffic and kids playing in yards. I stood at the dock where my daughter had once caught her first fish and quietly ran my hand across the railing. Lily's drawing was still taped to the fridge. Rachel's lake, not yet, but soon. The very next morning, I received 3 new violations in a single envelope. Unauthorized exterior lighting, the same porch light I'd had for 3 months. 2. Improper grass height on side lawn, cut to 2.5 inches. Regulation said 3 max. 3. Suspicious social behavior. Undermining community trust. No citation number, just Patricia's signature. Fine total, $950. It wasn't even subtle anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the lake deed, framed it, and hung it in my front hallway. And then I went to work. My first move was subtle. A legal letter, drafted by Margot and notarized at the courthouse, sent to Patricia and the HOA board. The subject line was simple. Notice of non-renewal, Lakeshore Recreational Lease Agreement. The body of the letter was even simpler. As legal owner of the lake property previously leased to the Lakeshore Heights HOA, this notice formally declines. Renewal of the recreational use agreement upon expiration, effective in 26 days. All legal access, community use rights, and associated privileges will terminate unless a new agreement is negotiated under revised terms. I didn't offer revised terms, I just let the clock start ticking. Patricia didn't respond, but something told me she got the message, because the very next day, a bright blue sign appeared at the community entrance. Community Lake Revitalization Meeting Saturday. HOA Clubhouse. 6:00 p.m. Help us elevate our shared space. I attended in a collared shirt, jeans, and quiet confidence. Merrick, Margot, and 24 of our Dockside 6 members were already seated when I arrived. We had agreed in advance to say nothing unless asked. Patricia entered late, lipstick perfect, hair crisp, blazer too sharp for the weather. She carried a folder and smiled with the hollow warmth of someone selling timeshares on a sinking island. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We're here to discuss exciting plans to revitalize our beautiful lake. Enhancements to shoreline amenities, new eco-friendly dock systems, and..." She clicked the next slide, revealing a digital mock-up, a members-only lakeside pavilion. There were a few polite claps, a few confused murmurs. "I'm proud to say the HOA is close to finalizing a long-term purchase of the lake property from the current holding company. This will secure access for generations of residents to come." That's when I stood up. "No, it won't." All heads turned. Patricia froze. Her smile faltered for the first time in months. I walked to the front and held up the framed deed. "Because I'm the one who purchased it." Gasps rippled through the room. Patricia's eyes narrowed as if trying to read fine print at a distance. "This is a joke," she snapped. "You're bluffing." "No," I said calmly. "I purchased the lake in full. The lease you relied on expires in 26 days. As of this moment, the HOA has no legal rights to the lake or its surrounding access." Patricia tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "That's ridiculous. That land is for the community." I turned the frame toward the audience. "It was leased. It's now privately owned, and I've already filed the legal notice of lease termination." Merrick stood up beside me. "If anyone would like a copy of the deed or notice, I have extras here." Patricia tried to regain footing. "The community won't stand for this. We'll sue for access." Margot raised a finger. "Actually, we reviewed that possibility." The original development plan designated the lake as optional recreational space, not public, not guaranteed, and not part of the mandatory HOA provisions. A man in the second row spoke up. "So we're just banned from the lake now?" I turned to face the room. "No, not banned. But there will be new rules. Because this community was built on exclusion, bullying, and backroom deals. That ends now." I walked out of the room without another word. The silence behind me said more than Patricia ever could. By the next morning, the shift had begun. Dockside 6 doubled in size. Neighbors who had never spoken to one another were now organizing, sharing notes, reading governing documents. Patricia, on the other hand, launched a campaign of desperation. She held an emergency HOA board meeting 2 days later, closed to residents. But word leaked quickly. She proposed a special assessment fee to raise funds for legal defense of community assets. Then came the rumors. Nathan's trying to develop condos. Nathan's planning to build a mansion on the lake. Nathan's working with outsiders to flip the community. I let it all circulate. Then I scheduled a community-wide announcement for Saturday morning. Open invitation. Outdoors. No agenda listed. Nearly 100 people showed up. Lily stood beside me, holding her mother's old fishing hat. I stepped forward and took the mic. This lake was meant to be a place of peace, a place to connect, to heal, to gather. My wife loved this place. My daughter smiled here for the first time in months because of this water. I paused, then smiled softly. But that peace was stolen by an HOA that forgot how to lead with compassion. So I took it back. There were murmurs, eyes scanning each other for reactions. "I'm not building anything. I'm not charging fees. I'm not closing access, unless you were part of the board that used this lake to punish others." I looked toward Patricia in the back. For them, access is suspended pending a new code of conduct. Then I pulled the cloth off a wooden sign beside me. "Welcome to Rachel's Lake, a shared space for healing, fishing, and family." The crowd erupted in quiet applause. Some gasped. Lily beamed. And Patricia? She turned and walked away, not in protest, in defeat. Patricia didn't show her face in public for 3 days after the unveiling of Rachel's Lake. When she finally did, it was behind tinted sunglasses and beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Powerful armor turned pitiful disguise. By then, the shift wasn't just legal, it was cultural. The fear she once inspired had curdled into quiet resentment. The stories had spread. How she fined a veteran for putting up a flag. How she banned a foster mom's kids from the pool. How she humiliated a grieving widow over flower beds. Every violation she'd issued now sounded less like a regulation and more like a punishment. The neighborhood was remembering all the things they'd swallowed and excused, and now they had a reason to stop pretending. It wasn't just because of me, it was because I'd shown them she could be beaten. Still, I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. I had what I wanted, Rachel's name carved in cedar, mounted by the dock where Lily now fished every Saturday morning. Instead of punishing the board publicly, I let time and truth take care of that. But I wasn't done. Yet with help from Merrick and Margot, we launched a community reform plan, a full audit of the HOA's last 5 years of spending, board communications, and violation distributions. At first, the board resisted, claimed we had no authority. That was when Margot revealed she'd quietly filed a homeowner petition signed by 68% of the community to demand a full HOA leadership re-election and ethics review. By law, that was more than enough. When the new meeting convened, it wasn't in a conference room. It was on the lakeside lawn, under open sky, with folding chairs and lemonade stands and neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in years now laughing like old friends. I didn't run for anything. I didn't speak unless asked. This wasn't about creating a new king. It was about making sure no one else ever wore the crown the way Patricia had. Sapphira Dale, a soft-spoken woman who once ran the local flower shop and had previously been too afraid to speak out, was elected HOA president by near unanimous vote. One by one, Patricia's loyalists resigned. Some cited stress. Others just stopped showing up. The treasurer's final audit revealed over $42,000 in discretionary spending with zero oversight. Meanwhile, my phone started ringing. Quiet knocks on my door, whispers in the grocery store aisles. "Nathan, do you have a minute?" These were the same neighbors who'd once looked the other way, who avoided eye contact when I got fined, who nodded along when Patricia labeled me a troublemaker. Now they were asking about access passes to Rachel's lake. I had only one condition. No current HOA board members or their families, I told them. Not until the new code of ethics is fully in place. Some frowned, some protested, but most accepted it. Some even apologized. The next month, we launched Lily's Line Catchers, a weekend kids fishing program on the lake, with environmental, education, conservation projects, and guest speakers from the local university. We cleared out invasive algae, planted native water plants, and restored the shoreline's ecological balance for the first time in 20 years. Lily led the first session, proudly teaching 5 other kids how to bait a line and release a catch, without harming the fish. Her voice was steady, her smile was full. By summer, more than 40 children had signed up, and then came Patricia's last stand. She filed a formal complaint with the county zoning office, accusing me of unlicensed recreational business activity and unauthorized gatherings on sensitive watershed land. She claimed the lake's ownership was improperly transferred, that it had always been a protected community asset. Her complaint triggered a standard inspection. Nothing more. The county officials arrived, checked the paperwork, interviewed our volunteers, reviewed the environmental assessments we had commissioned, and left satisfied. 3 days later, I received a letter from the county zoning board. No violations found, ownership confirmed, activities in compliance with all local codes, no further action necessary. I pinned it to the HOA bulletin board for everyone to see. Patricia moved out a week later. Word spread that she'd sold her home at a loss, her name now radioactive in real estate circles. Margot later told me her realty license had been quietly suspended pending investigation into conflict of interest complaints tied to multiple shell companies. The woman who once ruled the lake with fines and fear now lived in a condo in a neighboring town, reportedly under an assumed name. As for us, we renamed the HOA charter entirely, the Lakeside Collective. Board positions became term-limited, community-nominated, and subject to monthly transparency reviews. Fines were capped, with all disputes routed through a neutral ethics committee. Residents who'd left due to harassment were invited back with community apologies and waived fees. The neighborhood began to heal. There were block parties now, gardening workshops, even a lakeside movie night. Things no one would have dared suggest before, not because they weren't allowed, but because they were afraid. Fear doesn't keep a community strong. It keeps it silent. One evening, nearly a year after our first fishing fine, Lily and I sat on the dock again. The water was calm. The air smelled like cut grass and fresh rain. She cast her line, then leaned against my shoulder. "Mom would have loved it here now," she whispered. "I think she does," I said softly. She turned to me. "Do you think people like Patricia ever realize what they've done?" I thought about that. I thought about power and fear and the way small authority can rot big hearts if left unchecked. "I think some people only realize after it's too late," I said. "But I also think people change when they're shown a better way." She nodded. "Like how we changed the rules." Exactly like that. We watched the line bob gently in the water. The sun dipped low over Rachel's lake. Children laughed. In the distance, somewhere behind us, a wind chime sang against the porch, and in that moment, there was no war, no board, no fines, just peace, earned, not given.